Today, we get an overview of Tanium's autonomous endpoint management on a special crossover episode with Scott Moore. Welcome back to Tanium Tech Talks. I'm your host, Ashley McGlone. So, boy, do we have a treat today. We've got two guests with decades of experience to share, and one is going to give us a big picture tour of Tanium's AEM, that autonomous endpoint management. The other is going to give us a first-time reaction and industry commentary for someone who's never seen AEM before, and we've never done anything quite like this. I think it's going to be fun. So, first off, help me welcome Sean for his first time on the show. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
How you doing? I'm Sean Jackson. I'm a technical solution engineer here at Tanium. I've been here about 10 years, just past my 10-year mark. Before that, I worked for a company called NetIQ for 16 years, and prior to that, I was a college professor. So that's me.
That's an interesting resume, and 10 years at Tanium, that's like OG territory right there. And we finally have you on the show. So it's great to have you here today. And then our industry commentator brings fresh eyes to Tanium today, Scott Moore. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your channel.
Oh, thanks for having me on here. It's exciting to be here. I'm Scott Moore. I'm a performance engineer by trade. I've been doing that probably about 30 years now. More recently, I'm a content creator where I actually talk about a lot of my experiences in performance engineering and also about really anything that's in tech. My YouTube channel is called Software Engineering with Scott Moore. Really easy to find. And one unique thing I guess you might want to know is we also have parody songs. So if you can think of some of your favorite 80s songs, but you change the lyrics to something about technology, we've probably done it. So I'm kind of called the Weird Al Yankovic of the technology space today. So that's
Well,
that's my claim to
wow.
fame.
Oh, we have a celebrity here. A weird. I've watched a few of those, folks. Hey, don't go right now, but after the show, go look at Scott's channel. There's some really interesting parodies over there. I love the country one. What's the country one called about?
If I didn't load test,
If
yeah,
I
that
didn't
was
load test. Oh my goodness, you got to see that. So, Scott, have you ever seen Tanium before?
I haven't, and I have several connections on LinkedIn that work at Tanium, and I've had conversations with them, but we've never actually talked about the product, and I've never seen it. So this is going to be cool.
Yeah, so that's the point of the show today. You've seen those reaction videos on YouTube, right? Well, this is kind of a reaction video from somebody who's in the tech world with a lot of deep experience, but in a different segment to see their first blush at Tanium AEM. So we're looking forward to Scott's commentary as we go along today. And this is another special crossover series. We're in the middle of a crossover with ServiceNow Beers with Engineers. Now we got Scott Moore here. So we'll have some links in the show notes where you can find. We're also going to do a Tanium performance demo over on Scott's channel because of the performance connection. We'll have some links for that, but go check out his content after today's show and connect with him on LinkedIn. So on this show, you've seen many deep dive demos of Tanium's new AEM capabilities like Automate and Guide and Guardian, endpoint reactions, and all that good stuff. And those seem to be pretty popular based on your clicks here on the channel. But what we haven't done is a big picture overview of just what is AEM. So Sean, let's take it from the top. What is Tanium AEM?
Team AEM, obviously one of the big words in there is automate, but in my humble opinion, or obviously what we talk about is being able to automate, but making sure you do it in a very controlled and confident manner. It's not going to cause any issues. That's the whole realm of AEM.
Nobody likes issues. You know, I saw the meme recently that said the strongest steel is forged in the dumpster fire. A lot of us live there, and sometimes the automation goes sideways. But that's what we're here to do. Is we're here to give that safe automation, right? Yeah. So where do we start?
So I'm actually going to start differently. So I do also a lot of like home Tanium risk assessments, kind of seeing where customers are at from like a vulnerability patch perspective. So I normally start in deploy. So Scott, I know you're probably new to Tanium. You're new to Tanium. So what I'm going to do is go into our deploy module, and that allows you to do software updates and software deployments. Inside of here is a thing called predefined package count. I'm going to start there. And the reason I'm starting here, what we're doing here is reaching out to all these different vendors and basically saying, hey, here's some new software out there. We're going to automatically build the package for you, so I don't have to do it. But notice there's this little thing called confidence score. So what we have is over 30 million endpoints under management with Tanium. So what we're doing here is basically we get anonymized data about updates to software, what the performance impact, was there any application crashes. So in this particular example, you can see 2.5 thousand of our endpoints have either installed or upgraded this particular piece of software. And it has, 99% success rate, looking good. Application crashes, none. And then you see some of the other impact. The big one there is there was no sustained CPU usage. So there's nothing sustained for a period of time. And there's a little bit more details in our docs exactly what these mean below. But if you think about it, I kind of it's synonymous with a Yelp review for your software. So if you look at something that's a little bit, we'll say on the low side, we'll do low, and you do like the Splunk Universal Forwarder, and I come under low, you can see here 6.4 thousand have installed this, but it does have a 99% success rate. Well, oh, those application crashes not looking strong there. So that's why it gets a low score. So again, like kind of a Yelp review or being able to crowdsource your testing, as it were. And then pivoting off of that, one of the
Well,
things that
Scott looks like he's taking this in. I'm curious. What do you think
what do you
first
got, Scott?
blush?
Oh no, I mean I love this and I love the fact that it's showing if you install this, it's going to affect your CPU and you're going to have CPU usage increasing. From a performance engineering standpoint, I mean this is gold because you can actually go back to the specific vendor and go, "Bro, you're tearing up my machines here. What we got to have a patch already, right?" So, knowing the impact that it's going to have on the end user experience before it ever even gets installed is pretty powerful in my opinion.
Yeah, and the
Yeah.
story gets better. I've seen a little bit of the story. I love the Yelp review analogy. I'm gonna have to steal that.
Mhm.
I think it's very if I want to go to a restaurant, I'm going to look it up, and if it's everyone says it's horrible, I'm not going there. Same thing with patching or with your third party updates, right? I don't think I think I'm going to bypass this version, right? Scott, obviously, one of the things you want to do when you're especially you're talking about simple things like Chrome and that kind of thing, you want to automate it, right? But you want to do it in a manner that's safe and it's not going to, crush the world. So what I'm on over here is deployment automation. What I'm going to do is basically create one together and just kind of talk through some of the components that makes it safe. Obviously, you're targeting here. We're going to bypass that, but this is really important. It's called deployment plans. So what it does is every time you do any kind of action in Tanium, being an update to software or just any kind of action in general, you can define a very easy deployment ring. Now, this is a very simple one where it's going to the canary ring. It's going to 10% of my endpoints. And then you can see here the criteria. It's only going to move to the next ring if it's more than 90% are successful. And up here you can see 1 day, and you can see 122 machines are in this group. So when I do an update to a software, it's going to go through the proper change control, and we can get into details of how we can design these to be what I want them to be, as well as use that shared data model to drive that a little bit. And I'm going to talk about that towards the bottom here. Whenever you're doing software upgrades, you obviously have some things like, do I want to do any notifications like that? But I'm really going to go down to here, which is really important. So the software rule configuration, I'm going to take something simple like Chrome. And then what I want to do is just automate it and take it out of play, make it super simple. So I'm going to select Chrome here. And then when you get into the fun stuff, what I mean by that is I'm going to be a little bit more risk adverse. So remember that shared, confidence score. I'm going to only upgrade if the confidence score is high. Like I'm not going to do it if it's medium or low. That seems kind of foolish. And then what I can do is also if my change control says, look, I'm going to go ahead and wait until Chrome is out in the environment or at least 10 days. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying there's a new version. In other words, a new version of Chrome has been released. I'm going to wait 10 days before I go ahead and do my sequencing or my deployment. So what I'm doing is again completely automating it here off these rules. And then when it does go out there, it's going to follow my change ring design. Make sense, Scott?
Yes.
Any questions on that?
No questions, but a great comment. I mean, the idea of a canary rollout is nothing new, but you've made it very simple here to do. And uh, with these categories of confidence, love that. Can you think of a company who could have used this in 2024 with some major event where they didn't do a canary rollout and it caused a bunch of blue screens all over the world at the same time? If they
Ooh, boy,
kind
that's
of just
fighting
had
words.
this, I don't
Ooh,
remember who it was,
you
but
went there.
uh,
maybe if they had this sort of thing, that could have been avoided.
Yeah, boy. And the other thing, I mean, you can define specific machines that you want in the, the non-criticals, the non-business critical, right? And work your way up to the CEO's laptop at the end of the thing, right? So there's lots of flexibility here and the telemetry. So I think, Scott, one of the things that you would like is we can even, again, looking at that telemetry, were there application crashes, OS crashes, memory, CPU impact, all that as we look at those deployment plans. It's really nice.
Ashley, you made a comment that everyone always brings up when I do demos. Well, I want to make sure you're obviously picking random machines out there, and I want to make sure that my CEO and my executives, they're not touched, at least till last. So what I'm doing here is this is how you can design these rings, and I have and you can go up to 15 different rings here. And what you're doing, there's also a construct called deferred endpoints. And what you're doing here is you put in all the executives. So making sure if they accidentally are picked randomly for one of these rings, no, they're going to go last. So when you define these rings, you can actually come in here and define rules between the rings, and you can actually add it. Remember that the data for the confidence scores, you can actually use that data. So I'm only going to go ahead and deploy it if if the application crashes are less than 1%. So you can get really interesting kind of criteria between the two. That's obviously really important to design these exactly what you need. And then secondly, I need to be able to monitor these. I need to see what's going on here. So what I'm going to do is we actually have some deployments that actually have failed the deployment, the automated rings. I'm going to come in here and take a look at them. I want to see what happens. So notice here, the canary went out okay, but the early adopters, it didn't go. And the reason it didn't go is it didn't hit the criteria of 90% because when I come down here, all the machines are not applicable. It didn't go out to anybody. So there's no success. But notice I can actually override that, which is a lot of people ask for this is, hey, I still want to go forward. You can click on start and it'll just move along. So you have visibility over exactly what happened as well as the control to go on to the next ring if needed. All
Awesome.
right.
I would suggest
Yeah,
one change here is if you're going to
sure.
define the executive level as their own ring, I would call that the ring of fire because if you do it wrong, you may get fired for implementing that ring.
Yeah, the resume generating event ring, right?
Yeah.
There you
Ask me how I
go.
know.
100%. I think we've all seen situations 100%. So the other thing I like to point out is obviously this is on the operating system side. So I should say, sorry, on the third party update side, we do the same construct just to kind of pop over to the patch module, which does our OS patching. And I'm going to go to a node called patches here. It has the same construct from the OS patch perspective, that whole confidence score. So as I push things out in a proper change control, I can also come in here and look at the confidence scores. Let's do confidence. So where am I at here, Sean? Classification. Oops, off clear. Confidence. I'm going to do high here. And I'm going to look at some here. And when you highlight over them, you can see 345,000 have installed this, looking good, and there's no problems with this. And then one of the elements I would look for if I was doing uh, kind of utilizing this is when I look at low, if you look at the data here, this went out to 532,000, endpoints. However, if you look at the bottom in the notation, 1.1 thousand, basically 0.2% of the endpoints actually manually uninstall the update. So there's got to be a reason for that. But this is obviously on the OS patch side of the house.
Yep.
Again, performance wise, I think you've seen enough instances where OS patches might have caused some performance issues. So
And a lot of
never
times that
happens.
can really sneak
So
up on people
uh,
because they don't realize how many patches they've implemented over a period of a month or 6 months. So sort of a regression sort of type thing. So it's important to be able to see that. I love that.
Yeah, I
yeah.
think too, a lot of times going into a patch Tuesday, if you're an early adopter, even in that first week, it's like, okay, some other people tested this, but does it work in my environment? Right? So it gives you some confidence if maybe you hedge a week before you hit your patch Tuesday patches, this gives you a chance to say, hey, this is no longer guesswork. I can tell that I'm going to have a pretty good success rate and my team gets to go home on time today.
Now the other two areas, let you know, when I talk about when you talk about autonomous endpoint management, especially on the operational side of the house, is talking about I'm sure you've talked about it on your show, Ashley, is our automate module, and I actually use it for a lot of items to really take care of some low-hanging fruit. There's so many things you can do, and we talk about SQL cluster patching with going through sequences. But I do things that are really low hanging fruit, especially when I'm talking to operational people. The one simple one here is low disk space. So if I detect a workstation that is below a certain threshold, why not go ahead and kick off an automated cleanup job? Super simple. The second one I do a lot of, and I set up with customers, is run this auto fix of patching. If you're a patch person and you know Windows, there in pretty much every single Microsoft article, they give you a like multiple step process to go ahead and give it a try. Why not just automate that and give it a go? So what this is, and when you look at this, when I open it up, this is actually keyed on the fact that we're detecting a scan error. In other words, there's some kind of error going on when I try to run a scan. So what I do here is I go out and scan the machine, or I go out and run these steps to try it, and I drop a tag in there to make sure I don't run it over and over again. But the first thing I do is a thing called Windows Update Agent Reset. Super simple, and that's typically the first step Microsoft says to give this a try. Second step is what's called a DISM command, and then what's called an FFC scan now. Again, part of Microsoft's normal procedure of trying to fix patches. And then finally, after that, I go ahead and tag the machine. These are just simple things, block and tackling wise, that you can do, especially if you're a Windows shop, to automate some quick responses to patching. And there's a whole bunch of other examples, obviously, auto cleanup and there's the cluster patching. But I do this a lot, Ashley, when I start talking to people who are really interested in patching.
Yeah, we had a great lab on
Simple
this
cleanup
at
job.
Converge last year too. I mean, and I remember interviewing the folks. It might even be on the channel here where I was talking to the lab people, and they're like, "Yeah, our whole lab is hey, we're going to go try to do a patch cycle, and then all the errors that come back, we're just going to use Automate to go do all the normal housekeeping on those errors and run it again." I was like, "We can do that? Wow."
Yeah. And the reality is in Windows world, honestly, in a workstation, if you do those three things, probably time to reimage the box if it doesn't fix it. I mean, those are typically the sledgehammer approach Microsoft gives you to fix them, right? So it's just a real simple three-step process. Go ahead and give it a go. And I would probably say I'd give it an 80% at least. Typically, it resolves the issue. Super simple. Then the last thing I know, Scott, you're kind of new to Tanium, but Tanium's big thing is getting data. We got data upon data, and we're fantastic at getting data real time. But one of the problems with that is, well, where do I start, right? What do I look at first? And what we've added here and kind of to round out this whole autonomous endpoint management is this kind of overarching eye look here called guide. And on the Guardian tab specifically, what it does, it looks at your environment and says, hey, here's some things I think you should be aware of or high vulnerabilities detected. It's basically prioritizing what you should go address. So, for example, we've detected in my environment here, we have some end of life Windows 10 boxes. We also see there is an SMB vulnerability. Oh, there's one here for remote management monitoring applications. And I literally spend the majority of my time when I'm automating third party is going after a very simple remote management software. And the reason why is, back to your point, is there's been a few breaches over the last, we'll say, year or so that if they just updated a couple of their remote management software, they wouldn't have got breached as easily. So I go after this, and this is one of the dashboards that we provide with this out of the box. But it goes through it and looks and sees how many or what different versions and how much you have running out there in terms of remote management software tools. And again, these are all things that can be easily automated, and I don't have to worry about constantly having to verify that a certain version or something like that. These are just very easily automatable. So very very simple boards, very simple things to do, and it reduces your risk, and obviously your security posture is a lot better off.
Yeah, we did an episode on this recently, and I think there's even a cleanup action button in here somewhere that'll just go uninstall some of these things, like maybe Team Viewer's not your corporate standard remote management.
No, or the other one, Screen Connect, and the other one that was used in the breach, some of the other tools out there that was used in the Treasury Department, just they weren't at a high enough version, so there's a well-known vulnerability that people took advantage of, right? So
Yeah.
easy
Now,
things to do block and tackling.
now, Scott, I know you started in performance, but you've got a pretty wide skill set. I know recently you've been looking into some AI stuff. So this, where this guide and guardian thing comes in, is kind of like insights over your environments. Like, hey, you saw the headlines, open your Tanium console, and now you can see how those headlines land in your environment, how many endpoints are at risk. I'm kind of curious from what you've seen across like artificial intelligence and insights of other tool sets, maybe how does this rate for you?
Oh, I mean, this is the kind of stuff that prevents you from getting that death from a thousand cuts. The larger it scales, the more of this kind of detail is more important. And what you're going to be facing though is tighter and tighter deadlines to implement those fixes because the bad guys now have the AI too. And so they're able to determine you have these weaknesses faster and faster, and it's on this particular machine, and it's doing that automated scanning. So it's this, how quickly can you respond uh, in that AI, and especially that agentic world where you tell AI, go out and do this thing for me, whether that's a good thing or an evil thing. And how are you going to be able to let the agents fight it out? And if you don't have anything on your side that's able to deal with that, this kind of stuff is going to become really important to stay on top of. I can tell you that.
That's why I invited you to this show. I love that, because it's about time to respond. You're exactly right. If we've got these insights that are already there waiting for you in the console, it means you're that much faster. Because, if when I was on the road for Microsoft for years, I remember I picked up these lines from people in IT all over the US. And one guy said, if you get to work and the org chart is standing in your cube, like that's going to be a bad day, right? And so, like, have you seen the headline? You get that Slack, that Teams message, from your manager. Have you seen the headlines? Let me open the Tanium console and I'll tell you what our exposure is. Yeah.
Time to figuring that out with the fewest clicks, that's who wins the game.
You can see here when you're going through this, autonomous endpoint management, what the kind of intent is to be able to automate in a controlled manner using those confidence scores and making sure things go a proper change control ring. That's the overarching theme of what we're talking about here.
Yeah, and there's some other things that so this is, we announced this at Converge, what, 2 years ago maybe, and then last year there were some big things, and we got even more big things coming this year. So this is we're talking about some individual pieces of this. Folks, there's so much more coming in this space. I can't tell you about it on this show yet. It's not announced, but it's coming, and so I like to think of it as like self-driving infrastructure. So Scott, I mean, you've been in the trenches for years. How would this type of capability have changed your day to day in the past?
Well, I started in technical support. So this is where I lived for a long time, is getting the calls from the customers who were internal customers, obviously, to the company, and with their problems, whether it was with their particular application, with a laptop that I had to support, or sometimes we had to support all the applications. Having something like this at our disposal without having to do all of that grunt work to dig around in and pull back files and stuff from people's machines would save so much time. It had already been over before the person even knew about it. And so I actually have a question for you guys, because when we're talking about AEM, and I know this is not the only thing that Tanium does, it's just one of many things. So where does this cross over into digital employee experience decks and digital I guess it's called digital experience monitoring decks and DM? Where does it cross over?
What a softball, Sean. I'll let you dive in to engage.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like to
Yeah.
team up. So obviously, Tame, in the sense that it does a lot of things. Digital employee experience, obviously, one of the things you talk about is performance, which I think you guys are going to do in another one. However, when you think about digital employee experience, it's kind of what's the end user sentiment? What are they thinking? How do they feel? So again, what we allow you to do with this, again, we talk in the construct of these workflows. It's called engage. But what it allows you to do is get feedback from the end user. To your point is, many times our performance monitoring tools will say that they're running fantastic, however, the end user is suffering in some capacity. So just kind of show you, and again, this goes back to also enforcing standards. So for example, I'm going to click on notification here. And one of the things I can do is my workstations, I'll go into customers, and I found my high watermark is I found a machine that hadn't been rebooted in 13 years. You got to tip your hat. It was a Windows box, by the way. And what
Yeah.
we can do here is do something very simple. It's amazing. So when you click on your restart required, you can basically do pop-ups to the end user and say, hey, look, I noticed you haven't rebooted your machine in over, in this case, 5 days. That's a little aggressive, but you do a pop-up, and when they click on something, it performs the action that you want, such as restart. You can also send out employee sentiment questions like, how is your machine? How do you think it's running? So again, that it's additional data point when you're thinking about performance metrics. It's another data point to see how the end user experience is going from their perspective, right? And there's a lot of other things we do around that we can kind of get into for the decks, but 100% is that whole digital employee experience is definitely part of our overarching theme around this. And the other part of when you look at something like trying to automate things is I also want the end user to be part of the experience. When you're doing some of these actions for cleanup, I want them to acknowledge and know that when they're running that, it is going to cause some performance impact. So for example, in low disk space, I can pop up a dialog letting them know, hey, we detected your machine is running low on, hard drive space here. Do you mind if we run the cleanup? And then based on what they select, yes or no, we'll perform the action. Last one is back to your item, which of interest to you is when you get into something like browser performance, because we're monitoring the performance of the executables on the box, one of the keys for this one is actually looking to see if the process metrics analysis for Chrome.exe has exceeded over 60%. It's taking over 60% of my CPU. Do you want to go ahead and restart Chrome? In other words, being proactive and letting them know we see some condition that they probably want to take an action on. Let them self-serve themselves, right? If I can allow them to fix it themselves, more the better.
The reason I asked that question is because in my realm, when I'm talking to, say, performance engineers and people who do load testing, people who are doing monitoring, we get into the idea of monitoring. Digital employee experiences, what are they experiencing? But we also have to monitor that. And a lot of people, because I've talked about this subject in the past, and a lot of people from that side, that back end monitoring piece, are like, why can't you just get the same information from observability products? Well, it's an apples to oranges thing, really. This is more looking at the inside out, right? This is inside your organization, out how they're using those machines, rather than observing something from the outside into, say, a SaaS application or something that you deployed. And I think a lot of people get confused about this type of monitoring and the observability type of monitoring, the questions that you're trying to answer between the two.
Yeah, I
Makes
love to
sense.
tell the story. I've
Um,
had a customer who, as soon as we released the performance module and the gauge module, they were right on top of it. And they were getting performance scores back from all their user laptops. And then they sent out a survey with the decks, the Engage, and then they found a couple users who were missed in the last laptop refresh because of their low performance on their devices. And again, it's that last, I call it last mile of visibility. It's like stuff you can now read the user's mind. What's the user thinking? You can't tell that with a PowerShell script, but you can ask them, and then you can key off that for automation and automated remediation.
I was gonna say most people just sit there and suffer in silence, right? They won't unless you actually ask them. They'll just sit there and deal with it, and that just it doesn't help anybody.
I've got an interesting story that I heard about a product similar to this where they were able to tell if the company needed to build a new parking lot by how many people were in the office on certain days and how many cars would be in the parking lot over a period of time. They monitored that. And so they were able to find out they didn't need to spend the money on a new uh, car lot and save them all this money just from doing that. Well, that sounds great, but then you have the other people, the other side of this, who says, "Hold on a second, that sounds a whole lot like Big Brother." Do you get some of that pushback on that side as well, saying, "Hold on, what all kinds of stuff are you actually monitoring? I don't want you in my head," you know?
And definitely, and when you do create these surveys, there's an option to make it anonymous, but that does come, it does come up every once in a while. But there is the ability, like I said, when you do create the surveys, to check the box and leave the data anonymous. So it doesn't track where it came from or who did it. If I don't, then every time they do respond to something, it does track who responded, what time they did, those kind of metrics. But we can do anonymous.
Well, this has been fun. We've gotten through the high points of AEM, and in the show notes below, I have a long list of other episodes. The different features that Sean talked about today was just a teaser because we've got deep dives on all those things. So check out those. Also, in the show notes below, there's going to be links to Scott's channel. Now, Scott, we have a really interesting audience here of some of the best IT folks in the industry, whether it's ops or security, whatever their job is, they're using Tanium to do that. And these are people who are focused on really excelling in their job. And I know you've got some content that would probably be really attractive for them. Tell us a little bit more about what kinds of things they would find on your channel.
Well, if they want to know pretty much anything about the performance testing realm or monitoring APM, observability, any of those pieces. We cross over into some of the hardware stuff as well. We talk about home lab stuff sometimes, building out our own home labs, building out our own NAS, and stuff that when you want to have a demo environment at home, how you'd be able to test those kind of things. Enterprise software. We've talked about network devices. We've pretty much anything really, and then we get into the fun stuff. Lately, we started talking more about AI, and I just released beginning of a new series around a low-code automation tool called N8N that's making a lot of headway and headlines right now. But what I try to do is because I come from a software engineering background, we try to strip away a lot of the hype. You see a lot of the hype circus. As soon as something comes out, it's insane, it's the greatest thing, it's a revolution, and it's not even out of beta yet, right? So we try to strip all of that stuff away and say, here's how it really would work in the real world or in the enterprise world, because sometimes that's a whole different ballgame. So they're gonna get the truth and a lot of my opinions, cynical as they may be, on the channel as well.
Man, you're speaking my language. That's my heart language. This is the tribe here, because this show is all about, forget the marketing fluff, just show me. I need to know how it works today, right? So I really appreciate. Thank you for coming on the show, and Sean, thank you for this tour of autonomous endpoint management. And so for those of you who are watching, check out those links and look for it. I'm not sure what the release timing is going to be, but we've got a Tanium Performance episode coming up over on Scott's channel. You'll want to go check that out. When that drops, we'll put links in the show notes as well. So that wraps up this special crossover edition of Tanium Tech Talks. Until next time, go Tanium.